How's that? Great. Hey, I really appreciate everybody being able to make some time this morning to talk about posters. I know that when my graduate advisor told me in grad school, hey, you're going to make a poster for this conference, I was always like, why am I going to make a poster for this conference? And he would say, because I'm not paying for you to go to the conference if you're not showing a poster. And I would always have a very negative attitude about posters. But posters can in fact be very useful, and they can do a lot to build your career when you get the chance to present one. And so it's worthwhile talking about how to make a solid research poster that makes the case for why you rock and everybody should hire you. Because after all, many of us are in graduate school not to go into the world of academia, but rather for a good job. And posters are an excellent networking opportunity. So I want you to all do your best job in putting your best foot forward on that purpose. So today, we will talk about how to create a solid research poster. And I am supporting this presentation with 3 different posters that we've used for some of the research we've done. So let's move ahead. Here we go. Grand. So what standards must you follow? Now that might seem like an awfully strange question to ask, but in fact, when you make a poster for a conference, you're probably going to have to follow some guidelines that are specific to that conference. Now, the conference I go to every year is the American Society of Mass Spectrometry. 7,000 of your best friends all convening on a city to drink a lot of beer and maybe talk about mass spectrometry. It's a cool meeting, but they've got something very, very odd about their poster rules. Now, first off, if you think of a poster session, you might think of a room about twice or 3 times this space with some kind of listless-looking grad students standing around next to pieces of paper. That's not what you get in the poster hall at ASMS, because many graduate students have been told you must submit a poster in order to go to this meeting. As a result, there are hundreds, maybe even 1,000 posters on display every day, and there are 4 days to the conference. Each day there's a different set of 1,000 posters out there for you to see. So it's mayhem. To add to this, ASMS uses a very large poster format. I've written here 7'10" quote. That should be read as 7 feet 10 inches. Now I realize you probably think in metric, so I converted this to centimeters for you. So about 2.5 meters wide and, 117 centimeters, more than a meter tall as well. So these are large posters. Now I've asked for some assistance here in showing an example of what this looks like. Here. All right, just pull off the little power supply there. I have to explain, this one has been spending a year rolled up in my parents' basement, so it's very resistant to being held flat. But this is not the full size available to you when you're making a poster at ASMS. This is actually pretty narrow. This is probably not even 6 feet in length. So you can see that the posters you're going to have for ASMS are truly massive by comparison to what you would frequently see. Now let us compare this same information presented in a different format. These were made, I think, for a local South African meeting. It's the same content, still about proteogenomics, still about tuberculosis, but now we're looking at a format that's a little more around an A1 size. It's a little oversized for that. So you can see that the formatting may be very different. Just because you had a poster that you used at a conference last week does not mean it's the same poster that you just print off again or reuse the old one when you go to another meeting. So one of the first things you should ask is, how big a poster am I making? That's going to have some very big impacts on your formatting decisions. Okay, so let's continue on. What does my division require for a more uniform appearance? What on earth am I talking about? Well, you may not have the last word on what your poster looks like. If the Department of Biotechnology is sending a bunch of students to a meeting in Durban, one of the things they might want to do is branding. They may want people to say, hey, all of those cool posters I saw that had the blue and white logo on them, those were the UWC Biotech people. So it may be that in sending 10 students to a conference, the division comes to you and says, you're going to use this PowerPoint template for that meeting. So you may have the information you want on a particular poster file on your computer and find that you have to reformat it all to meet your division's guidance or your department's guidance. So also worth keeping that in mind. Next, logos. You would not think logos are a big contentious issue, but in fact they are. I'm going to ask if you can bring the red one in. That would be really great. All right. In this case, I'm using a poster. This is this year's ASMS poster. That's fine, I'll just bring it right in here. And you can see that at the left, I have a University of the Western Cape logo, and at the right, I have a Stellenbosch University logo. This reflects the fact that there are professors from both of these universities who are participating as authors in this research. That's grand. Now, what would happen if I decided that I wanted to put the Stellenbosch University logo against a black background? Well, you might think, what's the big deal there? But in fact, there's a lot of corporate identity guidelines built into how I'm allowed to use these. You're not allowed to use the logo if it's, for example, got less than a centimeter of space around it. So when you're borrowing a logo, don't just go Googling for your university's logo and slap it into place somewhere. You really should learn what is the proper way to use it. It may be that there are different formattings of this, for example, that are better or worse for your design. Now the next thing I want to talk about is the logo Nazis. When you go to some meetings, there are people who feel that some people overuse logos in their posters. And it may be that they're concerned that if I have these two university logos on here, that would be fine. But if I also include, say, a Thermo Fisher logo on here to reflect the fact that we use Q-exactive data, that would be excessive, that I'm doing marketing with my poster. So at some conferences, you'll find people coming around looking at posters very cautiously, and if they find one they dislike, they'll grab a sticky paper out and cover the logo. Really? It's shocking and weird, but this actually happens. So in this case, I was allowed two logos only because authors on record were present that were part of this poster to both of these universities. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside now again, and we'll continue on the way. All right, here we go. So, how do I choose what appears on a poster? This is actually kind of a difficult topic to broach, and I hope that I can kind of walk you through the topics that matter most here. Imagine that someone has paused for 15 seconds in front of your poster. That is not a very long interval of time in which you're trying to capture someone's attention. And I would point out the example of commercials on TV. If someone's showing a commercial, they don't have just some man talking blankly into the camera. They have explosions, and they have action and motion, and people having fun, and all sorts of things to appeal to the back of your hindbrain and draw you in. In the same way, a poster has got very little time to draw the interest of people who are walking by. So that means you're going to need a more visual impact as much as possible, and steer away from text that just sits kind of dull and lifeless on the page. It's a real premium on visual effects in these things. Now, you should be ready with what we call an elevator speech. When it comes time to defend your honors presentation or your master's thesis or your PhD dissertation, you're going to have some time to talk at length about the details of your project, and you're going to get some very deep questions about it in all likelihood. But at a poster, you're really needing what we call an elevator speech. So if someone meets me on the first floor in the elevator and we make it up to the fourth floor, I have a very limited time to tell them, what do I do, right? So I would explain, oh, I'm here to train bioinformaticists, particularly those who can help us fight tuberculosis. That's an elevator speech. Very concise, very to the point, and it helps you convey in just a few words why someone cares about your work. So this is what we're looking for. All right, so I've mentioned that your poster should be very visual, but the other thing I want to point out is that you're going to be telling a story. Every poster is a visual art form, and you are part of the performance of that art. So when you think about how you would talk about your work, you should be thinking about what are the visual elements I can include in my poster that will let me explain my work easily. Some of the things that you would like to talk about, you can't just use words and convey in very graphic form. So having some good images that fuel what you would say about your work matters. All right, now I put down some golden words down here in white. Take me through your poster. Now, take me through your poster might sound like an invitation to go on and on and on and on and on about what you're doing. Take me through your poster is usually someone talking through the conference fog. Has anyone been to a 4-day conference? 4-day conference? Anyone over here? Not 4 days, we've got some 4 days here. Okay, so I spent 6 days in San Diego for the ASMS conference. 2 days teaching a short course, and on the 4th day of the meeting after that, I was presenting my poster. And I gotta tell you, the people walking around that room were in a fog. Just a bunch of people walking around like zombies. Maybe they saw cups of coffee, in which case they would stop. Right, so you have not got a lot of ability to grab someone's attention when they've been through conference fog for any long period of time. If somebody says, take me through your poster, it may mean they're interested in your work. But it may mean, look, I'm really out of it right now. If you have something impressive to tell me, hit me with it, right? So it's advisable to you to be able to judge whether somebody is asking this out of interest or because they're just really trying to pass a little bit of time before they hit their bus to the airport, right? There's a big distinction between those two. Okay. Is that too real, Ashwell, or is
it's too real?
It's too real. Okay, all right. On we go. Push the meaning forward. There's a lot of text on all of the posters I have to show you today. And I want to point out that practically no one will read all of the text of your poster. The text is there to help if you aren't there to tell the story in large part. So how does somebody looking at this poster evaluate the text that they see? Now, you might think that I brought these posters along because I think these are brilliant posters and I'm a master of making posters. This is not true. I actually hate some of the things about these posters. So I'm going to try to talk about some of those. First off, what colors do you see in the text? What colors do we have? Some black text, some white text. Down at the bottom we've got some red. Okay, so we're already following one of the little hints that you can use about your poster. You're not required to use, all standard typeface with no emphasis whatsoever. In fact, given that nobody is going to read all the text, it's probably a good idea to highlight the text that you really want to draw someone's attention to. You can use boldface, you can use italics, you can use bullet points when you've got a long list of things, and yes, you can use color to highlight it. Now, why did the author of this poster, Tian did this, I'm going to blame him. Why did he choose white text up here and black text down below?
The white one is to
What's that?
Why to capture image, this is where the most information is.
Ah, it's a good guess, but in fact it's not what happened here. Did you notice the color gradient in the background? He's used a gradient background that starts out quite dark at the top, where white gives a good contrast, down to very bright at the bottom, where black has a good contrast. But you see, he ran into this sort of ambiguity region in the middle. See that? It's not quite light enough, it's not quite dark enough, and as a result, this text is basically lost. It's very, very hard to see unless you're sitting right next to it. Okay, so you should be thinking about that contrast, right? However, I would note, as he was designing this poster, Tian was not looking at it in printed form. He was looking at it in PowerPoint, which means that the colors he was seeing reflected the red, green, and blue light passing out of his monitor into his eyes. That is different than what colors look like, how we see them in a poster. This is light bouncing off of the poster, reflected light is what we're seeing here. As a result, it can be very difficult to get exactly the right color combination on screen to reflect what you're going to see in printed form. Okay? So, that is a good place to be. Next, I would definitely emphasize methods and results. If you spend half your poster on background and significance, it's going to be sort of a silly looking poster. Most people are not are interested in seeing what you yourself are contributing to this field. This poster is a statement about you, not about your field as a whole. So you should have enough there to contextualize the work, but you should probably not expect that you are going to indulge in a huge literature review. Literature reviews are literature reviews, and you don't find a lot of posters that take that form. All right. Now, I was going to note that an obvious way to go with this text thing, let me get up here again, is that you should avoid, that you can't avoid doing solid backgrounds against which your text appears. White text on black background, black text on white background actually works pretty well. So you can see that there's a pretty good balance of the text in this new format that I've used. The other thing is that you'll notice I've put very few things in bold. So let me see, would you mind reading the bold text under abstract over there?
We combat proteomic and sorghum and maize under well-watered and water-deprived conditions.
Okay, I looked through my text for a very short phrase that encapsulated what was the point of everything. So there it is. We compared proteomes of sorghum and maize under well-watered and water-deprived conditions. Grand, that's good stuff. Now down here, I have a statement about how we decided which proteins were orthologs, that's right here. And down here, we have another statement that says, this doubles the amount of data available to the statistical model, improving power. So what we have is a statement of the problem in which we're working, the basic mechanism that we're relying upon, and finally, what we gained through doing so. That's not a lot bolded, but it really encapsulates the takeaway message, the key thing I want everyone to understand after looking at this poster. Okay, thanks. Great. So, methods, results, make it really clear what this poster offers that hasn't been done 1,000 times already. All right, next up. Plan for an audience standing 10 feet away. If someone is 3 meters away from you, how can you reach them? The answer here is not a lot of text. The answer here is usually having something that has visual flair. Here we've got some nice red versus white contrast that helps to make the poster kind of stand out visually. We have images that we have our results presented in figures rather than tables. And ultimately, you, as the person participating in the presentation of that poster, are the person who has the chance to hook people into this presentation. If your letters are less than 1 centimeter in height, they might as well be invisible. Does everyone see the references section on this poster? You do not. There is, in fact, a references section. See, it says references right here. And then this tiny little scrawl at the bottom contains actual citations. Here we cited, we had World Health Organization Global Tuberculosis Report 2016. Citation 2 is Zhang et al. Nature Genetics 2013, right? We have all our citations here. Even someone standing directly in front of the poster is going to find those quite hard to read. So there's no need to clutter your poster with stuff that isn't really visible. I think using the centimeter rule is not bad. As printed, the characters on your poster should not be less than 1 centimeter in height. Conference goers are not as familiar with your work as somebody else in your department. If you put up a poster in your department, someone says, "Oh, you work for Pew? Okay, well I sort of know what he does. Cool. So I already have some context in which I'm going to understand your project." If you're at a conference, though, what if you get approached by a TB researcher? What does he or she know about what you're doing? Not a lot. So you may need broader context to explain why your work matters than would be true at a departmental retreat. Okay, next up. So, tip number 2, produce small versions for distribution. I want to tell you about one of the things that I found most exciting in moving to science in South Africa. The magic of A4 paper. See, in the United States, we use 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And if you make a large poster, you've got no guarantee that what you've put on that poster will fit reasonably on a sheet of paper. It might be too long and skinny, or it might be too wide, right? So, one of the very nice things that we have in South Africa is standardized paper formats. So, if we were to look again at this red poster, it has a particular aspect ratio. That is the ratio of its height to its width. This is an A0 piece of paper. Well, the piece of paper it's on is actually a 36-inch piece of paper, but the design itself is an A0. One of the benefits of having created an A0 poster, remember I could have gone really wide, this was ASMS. I didn't though, I used A0 because when I print this A0 sheet on an individual piece of paper in South Africa, it fits the boundaries perfectly. This was printed in the States, therefore the paper's too wide, but there you have it. So, you are allowed to print some small copies of your poster. There are some people who are really friggin' interested in what you're doing. And isn't it nice if they can just take a piece of paper with them that has your poster on it? Sometimes your information is really critical and you're hoping to make a whole lot of money out of it. In that case, you probably are not going to be presenting it on a poster. But in the case of finding somebody at another university who wants to collaborate with you, having that piece of paper to hand them is actually quite valuable. So, if you try to print your large size poster on a small piece of paper and the text is no longer legible, can you read that, do you think? So, will that work, you think? Okay, so I might have to pull my glasses out, right, to read it. But generally speaking, if you can still read it at an A4 size, your fonts are probably going to be okay. That's another way to do it, to use the centimeter rule. All right, now, the poster is lovely in red and white. I mean, it's just glorious, right? But these handouts that I've produced are just black and white. Now, why would I do that? Well, when I got to the United States and tried to print these small-size posters, they said, you know, we charge 50 cents for every color print, for every 8.5 by 11 print. It was only 10 cents a page for me to print black and white. And I thought to myself, well, the information content is not actually that different if I print black and white copies. So I paid $0.10 a page for my 15 copies, and then made one color print for my mother. Okay, great. So on we go. Next up, consider your options for printing. Oh, let me see. Khadija, can I borrow you on this one? There is a cardboard tube on that table right behind you. Please, I'm going to ask you to be my model. All right. So, Khadija is about to go on a flight to a conference, and she has her poster in a tube. So, I want you to hold the poster tube, please. Is that how you carry it in the airport? No, okay, so she's got it to her side, that's good. Now, let's also add some luggage. So I would like you to, your left hand is pulling a roller bag, and I'm afraid you have a backpack. You have a backpack. I mean, this is how I dress, right? So backpack, roller bag, poster tube. All right, what is your stance as you run to your airport? You run to your gate, because it's late. You got to the airport late, I'm just saying. So what? Okay. So did everyone see what happened with the poster tube? She started holding the poster tube very, very nicely up against her body. As soon as she started running at the airport, she stepped into jousting mode. People with poster tubes in airports are dangerous. So, thank you very much for that. So I want to point out that having a poster tube with you on the flight may not actually be in your interests. It's possible, and in many cases easy, for you to print your poster at the conference. Because if you fly to the United States for a conference, I'm telling you, you're not going to feel very human by the end of that flight. I know this because I never feel human when I get there. So what if you could just print your poster at the conference? Many conference centers have their own printing offices to make this even easier. So it is possible to do that. Now, what did it cost me to print this red and white poster? This poster cost me $15 to print. What is $15 in Rand? It's like 15 times 13, it's about 200 Rand? Something on that order, 200 Rand. Now, if you are an impoverished honors student, that may be too much. But if you're a professor who's lazy, you might just take the deal. So in this case, I was able to print this in the United States and not have to worry about carrying it with me from here to there. I still had to get it back because I wanted to give this talk. All right, next. Before laminating the poster, make sure it's worthwhile. If you are going to use a poster just once at a meeting, there is rarely much call for you to laminate it. If, on the other hand, you expect this poster to be hanging on the hallowed halls of your department for years to explain how awesome that Tian Yunis was, maybe you could use some lamination. It's more expensive, but you can in fact do it. All right, lamination, however, is an extra cost, and the larger the poster, the higher the cost in all likelihood. Next up, when you print your poster, if you've used some sizes, you're going to find it a lot harder to find a print shop that can actually deal with it. One of the common paper sizes that we find in use in United States print shops is 36 inches. 36 inches is great if you've used an A0 format, like the red and white one we showed you. On the other hand, if I use the full size allowed to me by ASMS, I would have had to find a print shop with a 48-inch printer instead, and there are a lot fewer of those around. So keep in mind that at some point, this thing you're looking at on PowerPoint becomes paper, and you have to have a way to deal with that. Next, I wanted to note that if you have regions, large regions that are filled with solid color, the print shop is going to look at that design and say, that's bloody ink, man. Ink, 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 ink. Look at all that ink. Piles and piles of ink. That's not great. And a lot of them are going to charge you extra because you use a template that's got a lot of solid color on it. The other thing that shows up, and this is not one that they advertise, is that if you have regions of big solid ink blotches, you're likely to get your paper a little bit wet and it gets a little wrinkly and it doesn't look very nice. So using big bold areas of color, while it's nice for visual aplomb, it doesn't really make for a poster that looks all that nice in the end. Okay, on we go. So make your images scale. This is kind of a hard concept to discuss, but let us imagine that I'm using a photograph of my collaborator, and I took it from his or her faculty page. The photograph that I got from the faculty page is about 200 dots tall, 200 pixels tall. When I cause that image to look 4 inches tall on my poster, I suddenly realize it looks terrible. It looks like this person has acne all over. What I'm looking at are a whole bunch of artifacts in the picture by scaling something that's too small to print size. When we look at something on screen, it's typically 72 dots per inch or 96 dots per inch. And that means that a 200 dot tall image can look okay on your screen. But when we print, we're frequently printing it better than 1,000 dots per inch. And so all of the little imperfections in the image show up rather better. So using a very low resolution picture is a very bad option for us. Frequently, you will find that you need to present some sort of graph on your poster. Now, if you only know the screenshot route to doing so, you might open Excel, get your figure on screen, do an alt print screen, go to your image editor, paste it in there, crop out the part you want, and throw it on your poster. And when you get to the conference, you're like, that looks terrible. Screenshots are bitmaps. They are this color, this dot is this color, this dot is this color, this dot is this color. That's what a bitmap is. So if you try to scale up a very small image, like a subset of a screenshot, a cropped screenshot, you're not going to get a very pretty picture on your slides. It is possible, however, to do things like copy an entire graph from Excel. If you go to Excel and you have your graph, you simply say Control-C, copy it to the clipboard, and then in PowerPoint you just paste it in there. So it can paste that as a Microsoft Excel image within a PowerPoint image. That's fine. It is also possible to use the Paste Special format. Has anyone used Paste Special in PowerPoint or in Word? Paste Special is often a good option because you don't want to paste the whole spreadsheet or the graph object. You just want to paste the image of the thing. And when you do that, you have the option of pasting it as an EMF. EMFs will scale just fine. So even if you blow up that graph to fill the entire poster, it's not going to be all jagged like it would be if you did a screenshot. So that's a good option. If you use R for your data analysis, I think some of you in here had some experience with that. You can also export your results straight to something called SVG. And SVG is a really great format for scaling to very large sizes. I would give the example of the spectra that appear in this slide. We could have simply taken a screenshot of our PSMs, of an individual spectrum identification. But instead, we used the export capability of this software to create an SVG of that image. As a result, it looks pretty good, I think. The fonts are all nice and clean, so I like that. Even when you look way down at the M over Z values, they're still legible, even though they've been printed from this format. Okay, grand. Now, I would not mention this last point, except I saw somebody in an informatics section at ASMS doing this, and I just want to protect you from ever making a mistake like this. Some people say, goodness, my PowerPoint isn't going to look right if somebody else prints it. So they might say, what if I just write this whole poster off to a big JPEG file and give that to the print shop instead? When you scale something like even a high-resolution JPEG up to a full-size poster, it's going to look awful. There were all these jaggies all over the text. It was very hard to read. It looked like an amateurish job. So going the route of simply printing a big bitmap of the entire poster is not likely to work well. Now, showtime. Remember I said that when you do a poster presentation, you are part of the attraction. So I want to try to walk people through some of the basics on this story. When your poster session is running, you serve as an interpreter of the poster for your visitors. You might imagine a Shakespeare play is a play, right? But it can look really different in the hands of different actors. And a poster is just the same. You know, if Tian were doing a presentation of this poster for an audience, he would do so quite differently because he has kind of a gentlemanly style, and I tend to interact with pieces of paper I see on the floor. So I think that we have very different presentation styles, and as a result, the poster will come across quite differently to different audiences. So remember that you're the interpreter. Look at people who pass by. You might think, well, I don't want to bother anybody. But when you are in a poster session, you are there to represent this work. Posters that have people standing beside them get more attention than posters that do not. I'm going to tell you a dirty secret then about conferences. You might have a conference session that has even numbered posters in the morning and odd-numbered posters in the afternoon. And so people think, oh, I'm not supposed to stand by my poster until 2 p.m. this afternoon. In reality, you are allowed to draw attention to your poster by standing by it, by telling its story in the morning as well. So you are not obligated to stay away from it just because it's not the session you're presenting in. Remember, your poster gets more attention because you are there. Look at people who pass by. If you're sitting there looking at your phone, has anyone looked at your phone sitting at a poster? I have occasionally looked at my phone while sitting at a poster. If I'm sitting there plinking away on my laptop or looking at my phone, and maybe even sitting down, maybe I borrowed a chair from a nearby table, I'm not doing much work for my poster at this point. I'm not drawing attention to it. If, on the other hand, I am looking at everybody, maybe giving them a courteous little nod as they walk by, that's good. If I give a little wave, sometimes somebody who doesn't care at all about bioinformatics is going to come to my poster anyway. Maybe they just think I'm the most interesting looking thing around there. Okay, so look at passersby, greet them. Prepare a 2-minute speech, not more than 2 minutes, that touches the high points. You might think, well, you rehearse to give a talk, right? Why would you bother rehearsing to give a poster? And I would say it's even more critical in a poster. If you don't know what you're going to say, if somebody wants to know the story, you're going to look like you're not even that engaged with your own research, right? So by all means, rehearse what you would say if you had less than 2 minutes to get the key points of your work across. All right, now, on this last point, I simply want to note, professors and postdocs and graduate students in biotechnology, sometimes we lack social graces, right? In interesting posters, inevitably, at some point in the day, a particular person is going to come by, take up residence right in front of the poster, and start interrogating you about this or that point. Sometimes it won't even have anything to do with the poster, and they'll just start arguing about something they want to argue about. If you have other people who are trying to see your poster, this person is now in the way. You, as the poster presenter, have some responsibility to ensure that everybody gets to see it. And you should feel free to say to boorish, obnoxious professor who will not shut up, I'm sorry, there's some other people standing behind you. Can we scoot you over here? People will not always take that well, but generally we require cues to behave in our best interests from time to time. So I would suggest to you that you help people realize when others are not being able to see because they are there. And at the very least, you yourself should not be standing to block the visual appreciation of your poster. Stand to this side, stand to that side, stand back with the crowd itself. You have lots of options, but don't block the text with your own body. Okay. So, a poster is a unique form of communication. It is not a podium talk. It is not a paper. It's its own thing. and developing skills to make that poster represent you well and to draw attention to you and to get people to think, you know, I'd really like to hire that person. This takes practice. And the first time you do a poster, you may not do everything right, but heck, hopefully we all learn, right, from this process. If you aren't sure how to make a good template for a poster in ASMS format or any other format, there are people here who have PowerPoint files they'd be happy to share with you. I'm happy to share with you the PowerPoint that I used today, for example, for the red and white poster. So these poster sessions are a great way for you to make contact with other people in your field. Over the 15-odd years I've been attending ASMS, I have met a lot of people as grad students presenting their posters who someday became professors in their own right. So these are networking opportunities for you to build the visibility you personally have and to build the community of people with whom you can collaborate in the future. Make use of these opportunities. Posters also give you the opportunity to understand your own research better. At some point, the work you're doing right now that might be good enough for a poster but not yet good enough for a paper, it's going to get better. The more effort and attention you apply into it, the better it's going to get. So I would suspect that if you make a poster about that work, you're going to understand a whole lot better which parts you need to get better about communicating so that somebody reading the eventual paper will understand your work directly. So there's a lot to be gained by posters. They're not just the ticket to admission to a conference. They are your way of getting your shingle out there to get people to appreciate your work as unique and individual. So I hope that today's talk has helped you to understand better how to do one well. Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? Ashley, have a question?
You can take this offline.
Oh, we'll take it offline. Excellent. Well, thank you for taking some time today. I appreciate your throwing in a crash meeting before lunch. Thanks, everyone.